Hey guys, so today I'm making mini gluten-free donuts. For starters, I am preheating my pot on medium heat. And to that pot, I am going to add extra light tasting olive oil. And the brand is Good and Gather, which can be found at Target. I will link the olive oil down below so that you guys can see it. I put about a 1/4 cup in the pan. I didn't want to overload it because I don't want my donuts to submerge in oil. So while that's preheating, I am moving on to the next step. Here I am going to prepare wet and dry ingredients, but for starters, we're going to start with the wet ingredients. To start off, we're adding 2 tablespoons of melted dairy-free butter, to the butter, we are going to add vanilla extract. I did not measure this, I just eyeballed how much I decided to use. Just enough so that it can give the donuts the vanilla taste. So next, I was going to add my egg substitute. So when I do baked goods, I substitute eggs with unsweetened applesauce. And 1/4 cup of applesauce equals 1 egg. So I added 2/4 cups of applesauce to the wet mixture. Disclaimer, my applesauce was a little frozen because it was in the back of my fridge. So I had to kind of unthaw it a little bit just to make it easier to come out. But it doesn't hurt anything if I did use, some slight pieces or slight amounts of frozen applesauce. It doesn't change the recipe at all, or it doesn't change the outcome. It was a little difficult to get it out, as you guys can see, with the measuring cup, but in the end, it turned out perfect. It's just I had a few frozen pieces in there that I was trying to work around. But again, just because it's frozen, it doesn't mean that it's going to change the recipe. Everything still turns out perfectly fine. So that's my first cup, and then I have to add 1 more cup to that. Alright, just making sure I got all of the applesauce out to ensure that it was the right amount for the recipe. And I also like to clean up as I go. That's just a habit. Lastly, I am adding a 1/2 cup of dairy-free milk. So here I use the vanilla oat milk. And I added 1/2 cup to the wet mixture. And that is the last ingredient for the wet ingredients. Okay, so I'm gonna grab my whisk and start whisking everything together, making sure that it's evenly distributed throughout the whole bowl. And I'm just going to set that to the side and prepare the dry ingredients. So for my flour, I am using gluten-free flour, and it's just all-purpose flour. And I realized my bowl was a little too small, so I grabbed a bigger bowl to use so that the mixing process would be easier. So for the flour amount, I used 2 cups and then roughly a half a cup added to that. So roughly around 2.5 cups. I'm not exactly sure if you can use any other flour, only because I've only done this recipe with the flour that I'm using now. I'm pretty sure you can use something else, but you have to remember though, it has to be like a thick texture, so that's why all-purpose flour is best when it comes to making like donuts and breads. So since I was making donuts, this flour was the best choice to use. But again, you can be creative and try a different flour if you'd like to. To this, I am also adding 2.5 teaspoons of baking powder, and this is also gluten-free baking powder. And lastly, I am adding a half a cup of sugar. I'm using cane sugar, organic cane sugar. This is also a disclaimer. If you'd like to use more, you are completely able to. The sugar is honestly your discretion. However sweet you want your donuts is totally up to you. I only used half a cup. I didn't want too much sugar in mine. Okay, so now I am going to mix the flour, sugar, and baking powder all together just to get them evenly mixed throughout the entire bowl. And once that was all mixed, I'm just shaking it to even it out, and I am going to gradually add the wet mixture to the dry mixture. And for starters, I mix it with the whisk just to kind of get it to kind of, mix thoroughly through. I feel as though the whisk mixes a little bit better versus using just a regular spoon. But I will use the spoon towards the end. So as you're mixing it with your whisk, you are going to have difficulty with the dough getting stuck inside of the whisk. So you will be shaking your whisk out probably more than a few times, just because you have to evenly get it all mixed together. There's always like those little bits of flour pieces at the bottom that you want to make sure you incorporate in the entire bowl. However, again, if you'd rather use a spoon to mix your mix, you are totally welcome to. Pretty sure the recipe will come out the exact same way. And two, you may think that the mixture is really thick. It is thick, however, that's kind of how you want it because the donuts are going to turn out like cake donuts. If you're familiar with the regular cake donut, that's going to be the texture in the inside of it. So the dough, if it comes out like this is perfect for your donuts. If it comes out runny, it's not going to fry exactly how you want it to fry. And lastly, I'm just stirring the last little bits. I evenly work through all of the flour pieces, so I'm just getting the spoon to kind of mix it through all together, make sure everything is mixed thoroughly together before I prepare to fry. So I'm using my cookie scooper. This is really a scooper for like cookie dough, but it's also perfect for what we're doing here with the donuts. It creates like perfectly even balls. However, disclaimer again, when they start and begin to fry, you know, they're gonna look perfect obviously once they go into the pan, but they are going to flatten and kind of get uneven and lose its shape a little bit as you begin to fry, because once you mix them, it's not going to be so perfect, which is completely fine. Again, it's going to cook exactly how it's supposed to. So if you guys couldn't tell already, I was trying to make sure that the donut balls were like perfect before I dropped them in the oil, and they are frying perfectly just as I wanted them to. And I'll give you guys a close-up so that you can see. And I may have turned them a little prematurely, but that was only because this was my first batch and I wanted to ensure that the bottom wasn't going to burn. So I wanted to get them evenly like cooked throughout, so I just turned them just in advance just to make sure that they come out perfectly fine. So I'm just giving them a little flip, and with this one I kind of flipped it on its side just so it can kind of fry a little bit on the side where it looked like it was kind of more doughy a little. And I actually did that to a couple of them. And this was just so that they can cook thoroughly throughout the entire donut. And this one here was very difficult to flip. The dough was kind of running out of this one, so I had to keep turning it on its side to ensure that it cooked thoroughly throughout the entire thing. I gave that one a thumbs down because the way it was working. Now I'm gonna start taking them out, flipping them over to see how they are working. And then those that are really brown, I just started taking those out. Didn't want the donuts to be like extremely crispy. That was not the vision of this plan, so. And that's the one that was messing up, but it actually turned out pretty well once it started cooking hard on that one side. Now I'm just gonna add more to the pan. And I'm just draining the donuts as well. I didn't want them to be too oily, so I'm draining them on paper towel. And then I'm also covering them with the actual pot cover, but I covered them to keep them warm. So I didn't want to bore you guys by constantly reloading the pan. So we're going to speed up the process and show you the finished product. So here are all the donuts. Here is my cinnamon sugar mixture. So this is just cane sugar mixed with cinnamon. The lighting is really light, so you probably can really see it. And then that's just plain cane sugar. And here are the finished donuts. So they turned out really, really good. And I'm just going to toss a few in the white sugar mixture. It would have worked better had I did it right out of, oh, excuse my son, but it would have worked out better if I would have did it right out of the pot. But again, I didn't want that overly oily texture where, you know, you're just biting oil. So the donuts were still pretty warm. So the sugar did stick to the donuts. But again, if you are one that wants to do it right out of the grease and coat it with your sugar, that'll probably work super great for it to do it that way. But again, I just wanted to do it after my donuts were already like drained and a little bit not as oily. So I'm just plating. I'm only gonna do 3 each in the sugar, and then I'm gonna plate the rest as just plain donuts. Again, just because I try to limit the sugar that I use, just cooking period. So I'm doing 3 cinnamon sugar ones. And you guys might think that the texture of the donuts are pretty weird, like the shape. But honestly, the shape won't be perfect. I think if you want the shape to be perfect, then it's best to submerge your donuts in the oil so deep fry them. That way, when they're frying from the start, they're covered from literally top to bottom. I believe that will keep the perfect shape. However, the way that I did it, I didn't want too much oil, so they just kind of came out any type of shape. But again, it doesn't matter. They still taste absolutely amazing. So regardless of how you do it, they're still going to be great. And here is the finished product. We have the 3 top ones with the plain sugar. And then those are the cinnamon sugar ones. And then there's 6 on each plate of the regular sugar. Or of the plain cake donuts.